Hello, music lovers. Welcome to episode 60 something of What Makes This Song Special. If you really want to know which 60 it is, I'm sure it's written in the title. I've forgotten at this point. Maybe 63, something like that. As always, I'm here to tell you a story that takes me back to a song, or a song that takes me back to a story, technically. And I'll talk a wee bit about the song in question. I usually talk about the singer. There's not really so much of a... I'll explain further on why I won't do that this week. But so this week I'm going to go dive straight into the story. It's autumn-winter 2008. I'd just get married. Me and my wife Linz were staying in our first house and life was amazing. Apart from the fact that I was still working as a chef and not making my living from music, which was what I really wanted to do. Nothing wrong with being a chef, by the way. It just, not to offend anybody who's a chef, it just wasn't my personal dream. I'm sure it's many people's dreams to do a job like that, but it wasn't for me. And it was something I kind of fell into whilst trying to make it as a full-time musician. And so at our wedding, whilst looking at sort of music options for the big day, I made the realisation that there were musicians being paid really well to play at private functions like weddings, corporate dues, etc. And this was a million miles away from the gigs I'd been doing. I'd been selling tickets to gigs and working really hard to build a fan base and inviting sometimes hundreds of people to a venue to see me perform my songs, and maybe been paid in a couple of free pints by the venue, which was as far as it really ever went, which was really grim. There was never really any monetary value in what we were doing at the time. It was always kind of just trying to chase this thing that, something big might happen, we might make it, off the back of doing these gigs. So we were never really paid for doing them. And I always thought it was really unfair. It is ridiculously unfair. We never really questioned it. I think it's just the way it was. And sadly, I think it still is. If you're writing your own music, a gig is very much considered, a venue doing you a favour by sort of allowing you the setting to showcase your talents. There's often not a penny in sight. And actually, there's usually a kind of obligation from the artist to sell an agreed minimum number of tickets to allow the gig to go ahead, which is, ridiculous. Anyway, rant over. We'd paid two different bands, one during the day and one at night, to play at our wedding, and it wasn't cheap. And when I mentioned this to my bandmates at the time, we decided that when me and Linz had returned from our honeymoon, that we should get into the studio, rehearse some cover versions of songs, and try and get a few dozen covers together, and start doing some weddings and some private functions that would actually pay money, and we could make a wee bit of extra money. And I remember thinking at the time, even if I got like one or two gigs a month, that would allow me to reduce my hours of working in the kitchen as a chef, and that might kind of push me towards doing, full-time music. And it would be good practice, learning other people's songs. You learn a lot from learning other people's songs in terms of just for your own craft as a songwriter, as a piano player, as a guitarist. So that was the plan. And I remember thinking, the band's already there. We've already got a band playing my stuff. Why not, just throw some covers in and see what happens. So when I got back, we started the band, the wedding band. It was me on the piano and vocals, and three of my very best mates in the world: Michael Oakley on keys and vocals, Chris Mack on bass, and the legend Daryl Elliott on drums. And it was a dream lineup. And our USP was kind of that we had two pianos and no guitars. Even though I play guitar and I love guitar bands, it seemed like a cool idea to be the only band in the scene with this unique sound. It was these two pianos, a sort of Elton John, Billy Joel, rock and roll vibe that we were going for. So we went into the studio, must have been like late sort of summer, early autumn 2008, and we put together our first set list. There were many songs that we discussed and debated over, and so many still on the to learn list that were there for months to come. But we quite quickly managed to get a set together. We played at a friend's birthday party, just a few songs to sort of test the water, and it went down really well. We were a hit. Everybody danced all night and complimented us. And then I received a phone call one day from a lady looking to book a band for a private function. I remember standing in the kitchen chopping something, onions or something like that, and my phone rang, and I ran off to the wee dry store cupboard at the back of the kitchen to take the phone call. And I have no idea how she found out about us. I can't remember if she'd seen a business card somewhere or something like that, but she got my number, and it was like a silver wedding anniversary, or a birthday, something like that. I remember her being really pleased with the price, and me thinking, oh my God, I was thinking that when I gave her the price, she would say that's too much, because we were just used to getting paid nothing. So when I quoted her, like a few £100, she was happy with it. I was like, oh, this is amazing. And before she hung up the phone, she said, oh, what's the name of the band? In fact, yeah, she couldn't have got it from a business card, because we didn't have a business card. We didn't have a business card yet, because we didn't have a name for the band yet, of course. So I don't know how she found out about us. But anyway, she said, what's the name of the band? And I was kind of caught in the moment. I didn't want to sound amateur or unprofessional by telling her, look, we don't actually have a name for the band yet. But I couldn't think of anything. I couldn't think of an excuse, and I had to just come clean and sort of say, we don't actually have a name yet. We're sort of in between ideas. And so she went, oh, you're the Unknowns then? And I said, yeah, that's actually a really good name. And so the band was born. The band name was born. Still to this day, we're called the Unknowns, which is why the channel's called Rico the Unknown. I don't know if anybody is wondering why that is the name of the channel. It's because Rico the Unknown is sort of like, it's like a combination of me and then the band, because I've kind of put everything together, and all the social media pages can combine all of my sort of musical endeavours in one place. So yeah, that was the name of the band being born. We had another successful night at her function, and then a few days after that, I was getting a haircut. And my barber at the time, Tony, says to me that he's looking for a wedding band to play at his wedding, which was upcoming, I think, in the January, so it was only a couple of months away. And weddings was what we kind of really wanted to do, but weddings are, there's a bit more pressure with a wedding. You have to learn first dances, you have to announce parts of the evening, you have to know what you're doing, you have to have a wee bit of experience. It's the biggest organised day of someone's life, so it has to be perfect, and you have to, as I said, make announcements and sing special songs, and you have to kind of almost help organise certain parts of the night to make everything run smoothly. And without the experience of ever doing one, it's very hard to know how to do all of that stuff and make that happen. But I couldn't say no, because it was what we wanted to do, and I knew it was going to be a much longer set. Wedding sets are maybe up to about 4 hours with the band, which is a lot of songs. You need about 70 songs probably, which I don't think we had at that point. We maybe had about 40. So we were thinking, right, could we, get another 10, 20 songs into the set list for this wedding? And so yeah, that would have been great. I think we would have had enough had it been a sort of normal wedding, but it was a crazy wedding. Tony and his fiancée had hired out a huge manor house in Inverness in the north of Scotland, which was quite a drive away for us as well. And they'd invited about 150 guests to stay for the whole weekend. It was a free bar, free food, help yourself, party all weekend sort of thing. And we were able to stay up there for the whole weekend as well if we wanted to. I think we ended up just staying for like the night or 2 days kind of thing. But this wasn't an ordinary wedding. We were thrown into the deep end. He wanted us to play during the ceremony, the drinks reception, and then play all night up till about 2 a.m, swapping on and off with this 3-piece girl band called Fever. And we were going to need to rehearse about 100 songs. Now, 15 years on, and we can probably play, 1,000 songs in the band. But back then, 100 songs seemed like a really big mountain to climb. So back into the studio to try and polish songs from every era, every genre we could think of. Our tagline was timeless hits and modern classics, so we had to stay true to our word and sort of get as many of them in there as possible. And when the wedding arrived in the January, we had this big set list, but we were probably still hoping for a bit of a miracle, hoping things maybe ran a bit late, hoping things that, maybe that people wouldn't stay up till 2 a.m. and that, we could maybe finish at midnight and we would have enough songs. I always remember on the way up in the car, I was driving with Chris, and we were following Mike and Daryl, and they were in the one car. and we were just approaching the sort of the Perth turn-off to head up to the north of Scotland, up to the Highlands. And I see all these sheets of paper flying out of the passenger window of Daryl's car. And I phoned them to find out, what was happening. And Mike answered sort of laughing his head off and said, that's the Johnny Cash numbers out. We're not playing them, because he didn't want to play the Johnny Cash songs. He hated them. So that was him throwing them out the window of the car. As if we could be picky at this point, where we had, that was at least 2 or 3 songs that we'd managed to rehearse, that would have been an extra 10 minutes in the set. But yeah, the wedding was amazing. It was 4 best mates experiencing an adventure together, playing music. It was everything we'd ever really wanted to do and not realised. We were too busy trying to kind of chase this sort of dream of being famous. Not that I'm saying that wouldn't have been amazing, but I think we'd always, like a lot of songwriters, you kind of think about doing functions and covers as being, sellout or whatever, and I suppose it is maybe a bit sellout, but it was still making music, it was still playing music, it was still having great time, the camaraderie of being in a band and with your pals and stuff. So it was amazing. And it was, just, there were so many funny moments. We sort of ran out of songs at 1 a.m. and Mike just pointed at some older lady on the dance floor and he said, "Oh, we've had a request from Gran down here to play the Beatles medley again." And we're all just laughing our heads off. And there was a drunk guy who kept falling over his own shoelaces while he was trying to moonwalk. There was a woman who picked a terrible outfit, whose boobs kept falling out of her dress, causing us all to laugh like little schoolboys on stage and not be able to sing a few lines of the songs until we'd kind of composed ourselves. Just a glimpse into what I suppose the future held for us, because after that, after loving every minute of that night, we were well on our way to making this more of a career choice rather than just some extra pocket money. So we never did play Ring of Fire by Johnny Cash or the other one which was thrown out of the window, but we did throw in Folsom Prison Blues when we were running low on songs. It was just the start of something very special, something that would take us out of the jobs that we'd landed in but never really wanted to do long term, and send us all closer to a life of making music for a living, which was what we all kind of wanted to do. So to be honest, there are so many songs that remind me of that chapter in my life. There are so many, because we learned so many songs for that first gig, and for those first year or couple of years of gigs, we were learning songs constantly. Still am learning songs constantly, because I'm constantly learning first dances and things like that. But back then you were learning tens of songs just to try and fill the set list and become as versatile as possible. And yeah, there are so many songs that do remind me of that time. But for some reason, as the title has already given away, the one that stands out is Video Killed the Radio Star. Even at the time, it was probably quite a strange choice for our set list. It's a song that lots of people of a certain age will know, but not really a song that we ever play in the band anymore. I haven't played this song in years. Sadly, the brides and grooms that we're playing for now are usually quite a bit younger than us, and it's not a song that you hear that often anymore. I think it would be lost in the sort of younger generation, and that's why it reminds me of that time more than the others as well, because there are lots of songs that we learned for that era of the band at the beginning that we do still play. Mr. Brightside, Dakota, Blue Suede Shoes, I Want to Break Free by Queen, all those songs, like classic songs that you play. But Video Killed the Radio Star was one of those ones that we learned at the beginning, and then maybe after a couple of years we ditched it because it maybe wasn't quite the floor filler that the other ones were, and some of the other ones that we brought in were and replaced them. So it reminds me of that time more than the others. So yeah, I think our dream of doing a gig a month for extra pocket money, as I said, soon became sort of 100 weddings a year business that would allow me to quit chefing forever and pursue music as a full-time career. And that, along with vocal coaching during the week and various other musical ventures, has been my life now for the last 15 years. So I'm really happy that we decided to take the plunge and learn some covers that summer. I'll talk a wee bit about the song. Written by Trevor Horn, Jeff Downes and Bruce Woolley in 1979. It was the first release well, the first release of the song was the recording by Bruce Woolley and the Camera Club, and then the 7th of September, just a couple of months later, British synth wave band the Buggles released their version of it. It's strange that they released two different versions of it 2 months apart, and it was, Buggles it consisted of like the aforementioned Horn and Downs. It seemed like the writing trio just decided to put out two very different versions of the song under two different names, and I'm sure they were happy that they did, because the Buggles version was of course, being the most successful of the two, ended up being a huge hit all over the world. It famously became the first ever music video shown on MTV in the US, airing at 12:01 a.m. on the 1st of August 1981. So the theme of the song is nostalgia, which is ironic because that's what I'm kind of talking about today. And the lyrics talk about appreciating a yesterday where technology hadn't spoiled the past, and the worries that the children of the generation would never understand the world as it had been. Quite ironic again, now that when you consider how much the world's changed in exactly the way that they were sort of prophesying in the song. But the real irony for me is that the song was made using lots of what would have been new age synthesizers and production techniques at the time while they were talking about the past. There were also parts of the verses that were made to sound like they were being played through an old radio. So very, very clever. And a real little cool fact about this song that I found out when I was researching was in the video, you can at one point see a very young Hans Zimmer playing keyboards. For those of you who don't know who Hans Zimmer is, he's like one of the most famous soundtrack composers of all time. The guy's like ingeniously written so many movie soundtracks, like the music for Gladiator, Inception, Interstellar, the Dark Knight trilogy, Pirates of the Caribbean, etc., etc. Just an incredible composer, and he features in the video playing the keyboard in the background. If you look out for that, if you're watching it on, you can find it on YouTube. So so there we go. I usually do like a vocal coach analysis at the end, as you know, if you've watched the show before. I'm not going to react to the singer this week. It's not really sung as such. It's a kind of strange use of vocal effects and filters that make the melody and words come to life, and not really something that I can sort of critique as a vocal performance as such. But it's brilliant nonetheless, and just an amazing song, I think. Let me know if it's a special song to you in the comments. As always, it would be good to hear what folk have to say about the songs. It's always nice to see people complimenting my cover versions of the songs, which will come up here. My cover of the song will come up here in a little second. You can click on it and it'll take you to me playing Video Killed the Radio Star and doing my own version of it. I always get lots of comments on the versions which are very complimentary and saying that they liked my cover of it, which is nice to hear, but I would love to hear more people commenting as to why the song's special to them, from this part of the episode. Why do you love the song? What does it take you to? Does it remind you of your wedding day? Does it remind you of your first child being born? Does it remind you of your first day at school? I don't know. Whatever it reminds you of, let me know in the comments why it's a special song to you. That was why it was a special song to me. I'll be back next week, as always, with another song and another story. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you then.